restricted immediately to redevelopment only. We're not going to take questions about demolition or anything outside of that. Let's keep the questions focused on the redevelopment and more specifically Mr. Barris' plan. So, Mike, if you'd like to take it away.
Great, thank you, everyone. I just want to first of all introduce you to my core team. I have two lead architects. We have Dale Knapp from Danvers. We have Jerry McNeil from Halifax, Nova Scotia. We have structural engineer Todd Headley from Billerica. We have Kevin Latati from Lexington, and Gregory Camille also from Halifax, Nova Scotia. In the back row is my partner Neil Hiskin, and this couple is Karen and David Baumgartner from Minnesota. They are considering partnering with Neil and I with the Winterwood property, which is part of our long-term vision for the Nichawag development. Karen and David and Neil and I would eventually stay on in Petersham as long-term residents and continue to operate that facility into the future. So that gives you our core group of people that we've been working with. Many of you have heard and know that I was a resident of this town for most of the 1980s. I owned the house on West Street. Today it's owned by Tom and Michelle Cahill. Next door neighbor was Candace and Tom Anderson, and restored that house and moved on with my life. I've kept my relationships going in Petersham ever since. Through the 80s, I would walk around the Nichawag and envision the possibilities that could happen for that property. And every time I came back to Petersham, I was really saddened to see that the two people that had ever stepped forward really never materialized. There was no real vision and no long-term plan for it. And so a few years ago, I guess it was 3 years ago now, while I was surfing online looking at houses for sale in Petersham, I noticed that my house on West Street was for sale. So it started to spark my interest in Petersham again. I immediately contacted Chuck, and we started to negotiate for me to buy the house back. Well, then the Cahills came into the world, and they got the house, which I was really happy to hear. But what really came of that was their love for this town. Actually, my love was projected through them in some way because they took the reins for the Nichawag and started to encourage everyone to start to look at possibilities. And through the efforts of many of you, an RFP was drafted and a call went out to the world on that property. I immediately got a call from Michelle who asked if I would consider stepping forward and put together a plan for the future of the building. At first I was a little shocked, but then I thought, why not? I mean, I think the building has possibility. I certainly had a lot of my own thoughts for the building over those years. When the RFP was released, I came to town in December, at which point I had brought Dale and Kevin with myself, and we went through the building, and we were really surprised to see the condition of that building was absolutely incredible. It's a beautiful building, and you know, people see buildings sometimes and they're dirty, and they think, well, it's dirty, it's old, it's not good anymore. That's one of the newest buildings on this common. And in the scope of the age of buildings, it isn't really that old. And when you get to the institutional building, those buildings are some of the newest buildings in all of town. So, yeah, they've had some years of weather and neglect, but they certainly are strong and plumb and viable. So I started to put together some thoughts, and when I was here in December after the tour, I put together a list of ideas of what I thought that building could be. And what I realized is in order for us to restore it, it had to have a cross-section of uses. It needed to have home ownership. It needed to satisfy the needs of the population, not only in Petersham, but it needed to encourage young people to want to be here. It needed to have some rental property. It needed to have a cross-section of values, high-end to moderate-priced housing, so that we weren't creating an elite ghetto, and we weren't creating a subsidized housing development. We were creating either first-time home ownership for some, or we were creating the next phase of a 55-plus group of people, which, of course, I'm one of those people, where there's a transition into independent living and no more lawns to mow and no more driveways to shovel and none of that stuff. So that became the foundation for my vision for what was a possibility. So then I started to have conversations with many people in town because I didn't want to come up with a dream plan and not listen to what the community needed. This project is going nowhere without the community behind it. This isn't about my dream. It's not about the ability of the talent sitting here. It's about everyone in this community getting together and giving us the tools we need to create a use for that property that is sustainable and that will take it into the future as a member of this community. So in those conversations, we came up with several different uses. We came up with a number of residential units not to exceed 38. 38 was a number that I felt was not going to be overly dense for the center of town, but financially made the project viable. Condominium ownership of 38 units was doable in a 100,000 square foot, 6.5 acre parcel of land. There needed to also be, I felt, a community-based amenities center. And what I mean by that, there's a section of the institutional building where I believe we could create an indoor pool facility, a gym and health club area, a yoga studios, meeting rooms, a conference rooms that people through a membership could actually use the facility to have recreational activities. So that benefits not only the people who live on that community, but it benefits all of us. Everyone in this community can share in that. There's been some conversation that the town is looking to build a new town office space. The office space you presently have, you're kind of breaking out of the seams. And so there's enough space in that development to create a 5,000 square foot state-of-the-art office space for this community. That would be a condominium that you would own, and you'd outfit and build out with our team the way you want it. So those were some of the initial ideas. Then I'm a preservationist. I've done 26 projects. They're all in national landmark districts, and I absolutely stand very firm in honoring the evolution of time in my development. One of the things about the Nichuog that to me is very important is the common space of the main historic building. The parlors, the sunroom, the music/chapel room, the dining hall, the lobby. Those rooms cannot, and in my plan will not, be shut out of use by anybody in this town. And so in my plan, I want those spaces to be retained and owned by the condominium association so that people in the town could have an event there. There could be movie nights, there could be dance shows, there could be all kinds of community-based things that go on and a fee be charged to support it, but everybody in this community gets to walk in that door and feel a sense of belonging. You don't have to own the space. There's been conversations about a restaurant. And, you know, I have a fine dining restaurant in my inn in Nova Scotia. Does it need to be fine dining? Does it need to be comfort food? There's all kinds of conversations about what's going to be supported. My vision is a condominium that is sold to a restaurateur who has a dining facility available in that space. Now that can serve multiple purposes. General public can go there and have dinner. They can cater an event in the main parlors. They can supply meal service to the senior community who lives in the buildings. There's a lot of opportunities for income generating mechanisms with a food component. Then we got into conversations around respite care services, and that was part of what the Peter 7 Committee Incorporated had a great idea. And even though they have stepped down from their response, I still firmly believe that there is a place in this project where part of their project fits beautifully within the scope of the community that we're building at the Nichawag complex. So there were conversations around respite care, there were conversations about day programs, there were conversations about rental units that would have the ability for dual handicap accessibility. Those are all opportunities that we need to further explore. And in our design phase, I don't think we've narrowed it down to any one thing. And these kinds of exercises are really what's important. We need to hear what you want. We need to have everyone's participation in this. And then we need to be able to take it to the bank and get it funded. Now, there's been a lot of conversation about how are you going to fund such an extravagant project. Well, this is a condominium conversion, and it's complete, the complete financial prospectus of this project is funded by the sale of units, whether it be a restaurant or a condominium residential unit or an office to the town or respite service or whatever. These are the spaces that are going to generate the resources that the bank wants to see, and they're going to fund the construction. Now, there are several projects, several programs available in the state of Massachusetts, and I'm going to give you an idea of some of the monies. In every project I have taken on, there's a pot of gold out there for almost every single need when it comes to restoration and adaptive reuse. And in Massachusetts, here are some of them. And we're going to apply to all of them. There's money in there for community development. Community development would be what I was talking about with the main floor. That is a prime example of an adaptive reuse for a community space. There's money in there that supports culture. So if you're using the music room / chapel for movie nights or dances or recitals, there's money available to help support that kind of initiative. There's education money available. In every project I've ever taken on, I bring in young people and I help train them. My life is finite. I can only live so long. If I can teach someone in their 20s how to do something, then hopefully my work doesn't stop with my life. And so there's money available for training where we can bring and enroll young people on our development team to teach them how to actually touch and love a historic building. There's money available for emergency planning. Then we get into the whole thing about respite care or any kind of seniors living on the property. There are services that are going to be needed there for safety. Well, there's money available for that stuff. There's energy money, conservation and renewable technologies. There's all kinds of money available for green development, whether it be heating your water, watering your lawns, even paving your driveways can be done with green technology, where you don't have an asphalt driveway, you have a green driveway. There is a sod that grows in a waffle-type paver stone, and you don't have a blacktop, poisonous ground to walk on. There's money around environment stuff, capturing rainwater, redirecting natural resources. There's monies for Preservation Massachusetts. This property was identified as one of the top 10 endangered historic sites in the state of Massachusetts. And with that comes a pot of gold. We're going to go get a piece of it for Peter Sam. There's there's money about historic preservation, lots of that going on over there. There's money for libraries. There's a need in this community for there to be a link between this project and the public library by way of utility easement. There's been conversation around septic and water services. Well, guess what? There's money in the library sector that could support that kind of easement, whether it be just the legal technology of it, the legal deed conveyance issue. There's money to pay for that stuff. What I'm really excited about is that this project is so noteworthy that it's worthy of a documentary. This project, there are lots of large buildings throughout all America and in Canada that people just don't know what to do with. TV shows like HGTV and some of those networks are making millions and millions of dollars teaching people how to do something. This is an opportunity to put Petersham on the map from how this little town did it right. And with that comes an incredible amount of free stuff. Every supplier, every technology company, everybody that supplies something in building trades of today is going to want to have their name in the credits. That's something that Greg McNeil and I would want to work really closely on because it is an untapped resource, and this building, I believe, qualifies on every aspect. So, that's, in short, our plan.
Did you want to talk a little more about
Yeah, I'm going to,
plan?
yes, I would like to have Todd Headley, who is our structural engineer, talk to the community about his observations today on his walkthrough from the basement of those buildings to the attic. Todd?
For the most part, it's generally in good condition. There are certain areas that we saw that, floors are a little bit saggy. Saggy a little bit. It's a technical thing. The roofs, there's some issues with the roofs, but, in general, what I saw, we can preserve it. The foundations are in good shape. Other than that.
Did you see much rot or anything in the beams, and how are the sills? Did you get that close a look, or?
Yeah, we were in the basement and we walked around on all the floors, and it just, I'd say 5 to 10% of the structure, there's issues, but other than that, we don't have X-ray vision, so,
Yeah.
without opening the walls, we don't know what's there, but from what I saw, 5 to 10%.
Dale, could you chime in on what you said?
Yeah, sure. Well, one of the things that we do, because as you may know, as I'm sure you know, there are multiple buildings, people can sort of see this. So you have the original in here, as well as at the back. This building again was moved to the site as a small piece. So what we saw that's the most deteriorated is actually a link that was built between. It appears quite evident there was a small stretch of building that was added onto the side of that wing, which tied these two buildings together. And if you walk around the back, you see that the tree growing on the roof. There is a small one. But that's where the roof is actually sort of wavering and probably didn't fall down in this heavy snow over this winter, so it has some structural integrity, but it's certainly something that has to be repaired or removed and completely rebuilt. But the main structure within the building, there is one anomaly in the main building at the second floor that is sort of a beam that's protruded, so it's probably a sunken joist on one side or the other. But the ridges of the building are very, true and straight. You don't see sort of, swagging and swaying ridges that is often a sign that there's something else happening. Where we could get in the basement, as everyone has, I'm sure, heard, there is water standing in some of the basement. There's only a small percentage where that's the case. There's a small basement under this front area of the building that is extra low where the water heaters and so on were for the kitchen. There's standing water in there. We were able to get to the joist of the floor above the main floor under that. And while they are damp, they were solid. They're not just a little bit funky on a quarter of an inch or so. But the integrity is there. The building that was moved, the same thing. Things are solid and stable. It seems the sills are tight in that building. And then the middle section here, which is where the water is, that's where there's about 2 feet of water in the basement of that area. We understand it, and it appears to be the case that when it was there and operating as the school, there were probably pumps running continuously. So that's a little bit of an unknown exactly what will have to be dealt with there. It would be pumped out, and there's ways we can monitor, check the reinforcement and the concrete. But But since it's been wet and stayed wet, it's probably okay. What really causes rot and rusting is the cycle of rime, you know, it's a combination of water and air. So probably the fact that it got wet and it stayed that way for a number of years, to some extent, there's probably a bit of a preservation there. But, you know, we're not, you know, we're aware that there's a lot of work that's gonna have to be developed with that and treating it for, you know, for air quality and so on. But you know, these two buildings in the back in particular, as you know, they're not very old. They're a combination of steel and wood frame, and masonry. So there really is a lot of integrity. There are also buildings that are very good skin and shell that can be renovated and changed. You can add partitions, take partitions away. They are not, for the most part, load-bearing walls in the middle. There's a column structure in there that's concealed within the walls. So there's really a lot of flexibility with these buildings in particular to be restored. And then, you know, the front building is going to be much more true of a preservation as opposed to a repair. But again, the attic, fortunately, the roof was repaired on it in, you know, over the past several years. The attic is completely visible. The wood structure is in good condition, no serious damage there. There is this link here that people are aware of. There was water coming in for some time, but I think it was the town repaired. So the plaster is all off there and so on. And there's probably some skin in there and bones that have to be repaired. But as Todd was saying, for the overall structure, you know, on a kind of board by board member, there's going to be a few pieces, but the building's not leaning, the stands are straight, the windows are straight, all of the main components of the building seem to be intact. There may or may not be a little bit, we couldn't see everything because it's crawl space for the sills here, but all of us on our team have done a number of buildings where we've raised things up and replaced the sills. When you think about it as a homeowner, and we've done that on our own homes, it's a monumental task. But on a commercial scale of a project like this, replacing a few sills or replacing a few joists is kind of a routine matter and not something that really has to be at the same time. Yes?
What is the composition and condition of the basement walls? And maybe different in different buildings, but
It is different buildings. This building that was moved is actually fieldstone laid up with concrete. The original building, most of this is also fieldstone and not that much of it is visible. This piece that was a later addition is concrete block. Again, it seems stable. No major cracking seen here. Right at the front porch, there's one that's just really a site wall, but there is a major cracking. But the rest of the perimeter here, we've not seen any major damage. And the two newer buildings are all concrete up to above grade. And again, all of that looks sound. It's just going to be a little bit confirmed with reinforcing the water.
why can't you see the fieldstone wall?
Well, partly, we did kind of crawl back, partly it's concealed with bushes and so on, so
Oh, I
you
meant,
can see it, but you can't get a great.
well, I meant from like the basement side.
Most of it, because there's only a crawl space,